You're watching In Your Interest, and the big story we're talking about here on the show is the big question: will the Reserve Bank of India cut rates at its latest policy meeting, considering how food inflation has gone through the roof? The RBI Monetary Policy Meet has kicked off today. The three-day meeting will end on the 6th of December with Governor Shaktikanta announcing a final decision. The meeting is happening against the backdrop of a slowdown in India's GDP for the second quarter of the year. Remember, India's GDP stood at 5.36% in quarter 2 of the current financial year. Not just that, India's retail inflation surged to over 6%, 6.21% in the month of October, breaching the Reserve Bank of India's tolerance band of within 6%. This marks a sharp rise from 5.49% in September, driven largely by skyrocketing food prices, which, incidentally, food inflation jumping nearly 11%, 10.87%. As households feel the pinch of soaring costs, the big question looms: will the RBI reconsider its rate cut trajectory amidst mounting inflationary pressures? So we have Mr. Vivek Kumar, Economist at QuantEco, joining us on the show. For more on that, Vivek, talk to us. You have the inflation number going up, you have the GDP number coming down. What do you think the RBI can do? Because the problem here is that you damn it if you do, damn it if you don't.
So correct, food has been playing a spoil sport of late. And in fact, out of, let's say, the headline 6% plus print that we saw last time, almost 9% plus was on account of food inflation. 9% year on year is food. The non-food part is still pretty much docile. So the problem essentially boils down to having a control on food inflation rather than rest of the basket. So fuel, which is pretty much in negative territory for more than a year now. Core inflation, which is your food minus fuel, is still pretty benign. It's still under 4%. So, if you have to take that overall view, then it's food which is spoiling the party.
Food is certainly spoiling the party for inflation. And in this context, tell us, you there at QuantEco, what is your assessment? What do you think the RBI's policy stance be at the end of this latest Monetary Policy Committee meeting?
So we as a house, QuantEco does not believe that the MPC is going to change its monetary policy stance, which is likely to be maintained at neutral for the time being. And the reason why we say is because, as you said yourself, the headline inflation is pretty high. Within headline, one particular component is too high. And looking at what their mandate is, which is to have inflation as close as possible to the target, which is 4%, it doesn't give them a lot of room. So from a mandate perspective, they don't have much leeway. So we would expect these stance to be maintained at neutral. Having said so, there are also concerns which have emerged in the very recent past. So both globally as well as domestically. Domestically, we saw the Q2 GDP print undershooting expectations by a significant margin. At the same time, globally, things have become much more uncertain. The geopolitics has been on a slippery turf right since 2022, the Russia-Ukraine war, and then you have these disturbances in the Middle East. So it's been a simmering situation as far as geopolitics is concerned. Now, with the change of regime in the US, the geoeconomics is also going to be highly unpredictable. We saw some bit of overtures being made during the election campaign, and in fact, even before Trump has assumed power, which is going to happen in January 25, the initial sound bites which are coming from the US gives you an indication that the entire geoeconomic world order might be in for a reset. So it's an unpredictable time from a trade policy perspective. It's unpredictable time from an immigration perspective. It's unpredictable time from a tax perspective. So a lot of uncertainties as we go into 25. So RBI probably would also take that into account and its negative spillovers on growth. and possibly try to give a feeler to market participants in terms of how they could look at maybe accommodating in a bit by bit manner. And one way to do that would be to start uh, neutralizing the effect of FX intervention, which is currently happening. So currently, RBI is selling dollars in the foreign exchange market. That dollar selling is sucking out rupee liquidity from the money markets. So essentially, what the RBI could at least start doing on the margin is start infusing primary liquidity or start sterilizing the impact of its FX intervention, so that the money market rates do not harden incrementally. So if it hardens incrementally on account of FX intervention, then it would run in contradiction to the neutral policy stand. So we would expect some sort of a liquidity support from the central bank, and to us, CRR cut seems to be a logical choice to do that.
Right, it is a very sticky situation for the Reserve Bank of India, isn't it? Global central banks across the board are cutting rates, but in India, growth is slowing, inflation is rising. It's going to be very difficult for the Reserve Bank of India to make that tightrope walk.
Yes, I absolutely do agree that it's a tricky situation to be in. And a quarter ago, we probably would not have imagined this situation would be playing out, because food prices in India, they are notorious for being volatile. And the current situation, you can blame it entirely on food. And within food, it's not the entire food basket which is misbehaving. It's select food items which are misbehaving. And trying to get a sense of forecasting these food prices, even in the very near term, is fraught with a huge amount of challenge. So that's on the one side. The other side is the growth angle, which has disappointed us with a very soft number. So I think broadly the message which is probably going to come out from the RBI is that yes, there was a miss, and that miss on growth is likely to pull down their forecast for GDP growth. So possibly they will probably bring down 7.2% GDP growth estimate for the current financial year to somewhere close to 6.7, 6.8%. This is what we would expect. Our own internal estimate is that GDP growth will be much lower at 6.4%. Now, even with that assumption, I think the deductive logic tells us that, let's say, if we are forecasting a 6.4% GDP growth for the full year, for second half, GDP growth probably will be much higher. So first half GDP on an average was 6%. And if somebody is forecasting a 6.4%, then essentially what it implies is that the second half GDP growth will be 6.8%. So incrementally, I think H2, the second half, is going to be better than H1, because agricultural output will come on board. So all the talk of a healthy Kharif sowing, all that will now start seeing the light of the day. There is reason to be optimistic on the Rabi sowing bit. The reservoir levels are pretty healthy, and there is an expectation of winter rains which are likely to be favorable once again. So net agriculture probably will be the lone shining star. In fact, it could actually uplift GDP growth in the second half of the financial year. Second reason that we anticipate things to have bottomed out, at least as far as GDP growth is concerned, that the government spending, which essentially was on a slow turf, post-election and post the government formation that happened, that was yet to show any perceptible signs of a pickup. Now, if the government actually would intend to be as close to the budgeted targets as possible, for that to happen, they'll have to step up the gas pretty much in terms of spending, both revenue expenditure as well as capital expenditure. And when that happens, it is likely to impart a boost to your GDP growth as well. So second half GDP growth is likely to be higher. The bottom point is that. And that will give RBI some comfort, and probably it will try and portray the situation that things are not as bad as the Q2 GDP growth data portrays. Now, having said that, yes, the broader point of other central banks easing interest rates is true. And so far, RBI has avoided that temptation of joining other central banks. In fact, of late, this trend is now on a slight back foot, because 2 months back, when the Federal Reserve started easing interest rates, the easing started with a big bang, with a 50 basis points rate cut, and market participants were expecting 100 basis points rate cut before the end of 24. They were expecting almost 250 basis points rate cut before the end of
Right.
2025. Now, those expectations have now got scaled back, especially after the US presidential elections. Now, the entire market is just pricing in about 75 basis points additional rate easing from the Federal Reserve. That's a step back. So, 50 to 75 basis points of rate cut has now got priced out by market participants. That's the most recent development. So incrementally, essentially, from an RBI perspective, what this means is that the pressure, the peer pressure to cut interest rates will be lower now than what it was 2 months back.
Right, fair enough, Vivek. The thing is that, the big question is, can the RBI actually even tame food inflation? It doesn't have direct control over it. Is it then time to, boost growth by cutting rates? Some say, RBI is in a cycle behind when it comes to doing that as well.
That's a fair point, and food inflation doesn't come under the direct control of the RBI. But at the same time, food inflation has linkages with other components of inflation. So food inflation, if it continues to remain elevated for a long period of time, it will start feeding into other components of inflation. So you and I will probably go and ask for a raise because food inflation has been high and because your inflation expectations go for a reset. So what essentially food inflation can do, or elevated level of food inflation can do, is that it can set off or trigger a wage price spiral in the economy, and once that gets triggered, it will take a lot of remedial action from the central bank to control it. So you don't want to get into that situation where that wage price spiral gets triggered, and you would want the inflation problem to be controlled at the earliest stage as possible. So that's one thing. So food inflation doesn't control directly or doesn't get impacted directly, but it does have a bearing on other components of inflation, including inflation expectations. Now, as far as growth is concerned and looking at inflation is concerned, I think what we are essentially doing is, given the nature of the shock that GDP data presented, we are focused on the Q2 GDP, and at the same time we are focused on the inflation, which is currently above 6%, being driven by food. For the year as a whole, if you look at the entire year as a whole, GDP growth in all probability would be close to 6.4, 6.5%. That's not a bad GDP growth outcome. I do agree that it is lower than what RBI was expecting or projecting, but even a 6.5% GDP growth for the entire fiscal year as a whole is not bad at all. And from an inflation perspective also, the 6% inflation that we currently are seeing is expected to be temporary. So probably by the end of March, you'll start seeing sub 5% inflation numbers pretty soon. So net, I think the broader picture is that growth has moderated. It has not been as high as one was anticipating it to be, but it's not a crisis situation. The crisis situation for India probably would occur when growth starts coming below 6% on a regular basis. So when you have a full year outlook where you're projecting sub 6% growth, that is where you have a problem. Currently 6.5%, if you ask any multilateral body like the IMF or the World Bank, they'll probably put 6.5% GDP growth as the trend line GDP growth for India. In fact, if you look at what IMF is projecting for India for the next 5 years, they are projecting an average of 6.6% GDP growth, which is pretty much close to where the long-term trend for India is. So it's not a bad outcome per se. Yes, it's a disappointing outcome vis-a-vis what was expected by the central bank. Again, if I have to point it out in its entirety, the chief economic advisor's own estimate for GDP growth was in the range of 6.5% to 7%. So it's still meeting that estimate. It's on the lower side of the estimate, but it's still meeting that estimate for the year as a whole.
All right, we will leave it at that. We're completely out of time here on that discussion. Vivek Kumar, economist at QuantEco, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us here on In Your Interest. And with that, we take a very short breather here at the stage. We'll be back with all about Pushpa 2 on the other side. Don't go anywhere.
सपना अकेले देखा तो क्या, एक साथ सच करेंगे, जब जुड़ेंगे तभी तो उड़ेंगे। श्री राम फाइनेंस हर इंडियन के साथ खड़ा है, क्योंकि भरोसा है हमें,
जब जुड़ेंगे तभी तो उड़ेंगे।
श्री राम फाइनेंस।
न्यूज 9 ग्लोबल समिट में आए सभी साथियों को मेरा नमस्कार। मुझे इस बात की भी खुशी है कि न्यूज 9 इंग्लिश न्यूज चैनल भी लॉन्च किया जा रहा है।
Special congratulations to TV9. Now you are truly becoming global.
And therefore I must congratulate Varun Das ji. He has, in his own way, started an epoch-making trend.
The News 9 Global Summit is the latest example to demonstrate that India and Baden-Württemberg are getting closer in many different respects.
I compliment Mr. Jubali, Mr. Varun Das and Mr. Kasper conceptualizing and organizing this grand platform.
I really want to thank TV9 Group, and it's a harbinger of many things to come.
You are watching News 9 Live. I'm Krishnakumar. Time now to get deep into the craze around Pushpa 2. Pushpa 2 is shattering box office records even before it releases tomorrow, the 5th of December. Allu Arjun, icon star. Allu Arjun's highly anticipated Pushpa 2, The Rule, is making waves. The film has achieved a record-breaking milestone with over 10 lakh tickets being booked on just bookmyshow.com alone, and has become the fastest Telugu movie to reach that figure. Early numbers reveal that the movie has already raked in over 50 crore rupees in advance bookings for its opening day, setting the stage for a historic box office run. With pre-sales reaching historic highs and fans rushing to grab tickets, Pushpa 2 is already dominating headlines. The movie is set to release tomorrow. We understand that the movie could make anywhere between 250 to 275 crore rupees in box office collections on just day one. To understand those numbers better, who better than Mr. Komal Nata, film trade analyst, who joins us live on the broadcast for more. Komal, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us. Talk to us. From what we understand, 250 to 275 crore rupees. That's historic. That is better than Bahubali. That is better than RRR. That is better than KGF 2.
That is better than everything under the sun. But you know, the craze for the film is so immense. People just can't wait to go to the cinemas and watch it. So I'm not surprised at all. I knew this kind of a craze would happen, and I knew this kind of advance sales would happen. I would have been shocked had the advance sales been less than this.
Okay. Let's then talk about specifically the Hindi market. See, Pushpa 1, for all the talk, Pushpa was a 450 odd crore rupee grosser. It did collect 100 crore rupees in the Hindi market net. Net collections were 100 crore rupees. This time around, it has to make nothing less than 500 to 600 crore rupees in the Hindi market if it has to reach that magical 1000 crore plus figure.
Yes, and that is very possible. I feel this just could be the biggest Hindi. I'm talking only of the dubbed Hindi version. This could be the biggest Hindi blockbuster we've ever seen. For several years, it was Bahubali 2, the conclusion, till Pathan, Jawan, Gadar 2 came and broke the records of Bahubali 2. I just get this feeling that once again, it will be a South film which will become the highest Hindi grosser, because this film just could outdo Stree 2. Stree 2 outdid Jawan and Pathan, and this could actually supersede the business or surpass the business of Stree 2 also.
That it will end up being the biggest Hindi blockbuster of the year, because I think Stree 2 did around 550 odd crore rupees roughly. So
no, 600 plus crore. No, not just the year, all time. I'm saying it could be the biggest Hindi blockbuster of all times.
Okay, that's gargantuan expectations. I've been saying this on the channel quite a bit. But tell us, the fact that they started the promotions of this movie in Patna in Bihar, and the kind and the scale of the event, it was more than 2 lakh people showing up in Patna in Bihar for Pushpa 2. That sort of tells you, the latent demand, although it's been 3 years since Pushpa 1 hit theatres.
Yes, exactly. The event in Patna underlined that no matter what, people are dying to watch Pushpa 2. Actually, Pushpa, that film, the first part, had made such an impact on people that they couldn't wait to watch the sequel. And everybody knew a sequel is coming. So, it was supposed to come on 15th August. When it got postponed, there was so much of discontent among the audience. Oh, we'll have to wait. When will it come? And then there were rumors that this wouldn't come even in December. At that time, people thought, what is wrong? What is happening? But luckily, they were able to meet the 5th December release date. And I think masses, classes, family audience, generally action films, family audiences keep away. But this film, even the family audience and masses and classes alike, mind you, even the classes are waiting to watch Pushpa 2. So it has cut across all kinds of barriers and all age groups, all kinds of people, all strata of society. Everybody seems to be dying to watch Pushpa 2.
Right. And it's interesting you say that, because see, a lot of especially the Hindi speaking audiences, they familiarize themselves with Pushpa after it went out of theaters. So much of viewing on OTT happened, didn't it? And in that sense, that's where the classes who wouldn't have normally ventured out to watch a film like Pushpa in the theaters, wondering whether it will be up to their tastes and liking or not, even they tested their waters on OTT and they liked it, and now they are geared up to watch Pushpa 2 in the theaters. I'm talking about the hardcore urban audiences in big cities, in multiplexes like in Delhi, Bombay and other cities.
Yes, very right, very right. Actually, Allu Arjun's attitude has bowled the audience over. People just can't get enough of Allu Arjun's attitude. His attitude in the film is so phenomenal that people want to have more and more and more of Allu Arjun. From a friend who has seen the film, I know it's a very preposterous statement to make before watching the film, but the person who has seen the film, he told me Allu Arjun will get the National Award for Best Performance this year, 2024. And the film is going to be a super blockbuster, a blockbuster of epic proportions. So I want to believe that this would be true because I'm as excited as anybody, any Allu Arjun fan or any Pushpa fan. So I think this just could happen.
And that would make Allu Arjun probably the biggest star since Chiranjeevi to come from Telugu, and in a sense one of the biggest stars in the country. He's already one of the biggest stars in the country. If Pushpa 2 manages to become the biggest blockbuster here, he would be the biggest star in the country.
Undoubtedly. And the indication seems to be that this is going to happen, because otherwise you don't get to see such advanced booking figures. It's crazy. It's just crazy. And as the hour is approaching for the film to release, the ticket sales are so brisk that it's actually unmanageable at some places. There are so many cinemas, their owners have been ringing me up and saying that we just can't believe that this kind of sales could take place for any film. We've never seen this kind of craze at the advanced booking or the ticket counters. So I think it's a beautiful, wonderful sign. And we have been saying that 2024 in particular has not been as good as 2023. In fact, some journalists rang me up about 10 days back and they said, how do you sum up 2024? I said, let's not be fair to Pushpa 2, because you never know. I might say at this stage, yeah, it's been a fair year. But after Pushpa 2, I might say that it has been a great year. So let's not be unfair to Pushpa 2. Wait for Pushpa to release, Pushpa 2 to release. It just could change the entire scenario. With that one film could change the entire year's perspective.
It could be the last ball sixer, as it were, as far as India's box office is concerned. I'm afraid we're completely out of time over here. Komal Nata, always a joy talking to you. Thank you so much for taking time out to be with us here on News. And I hope to keep having you as Pushpa releases tomorrow as well. And with that, we wrap things up over here. Thank you so much for watching. This is Krishnakumar signing off.
India and Sweden bilateral ties go as far as India's independence.
We have now more than 75 years of diplomatic relations. Green transition is a survival issue for us, for the world, and also for India. Even the small solutions have a big impact. For us, the will to invest in India is already there. India is a country that keeps us busy. The potential is there and we are ready to exploit it. That's actually how you build the cultural bridges.
And this is The Diplomat.
Heartfelt appreciation to News 9 and TV9 Network for organizing Global Summit.
I like to thank TV9 for presenting here a wonderful fusion of politics, industry,
जर्मनी और गुजरात के बीच इस मजबूत संबंध सेतु को न्यूज़ 9 ग्लोबल समिट का आयोजन और भी मजबूत बनाएगा। इस विश्वास के साथ आप सभी को एक बार फिर बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं।
I thank TV9 and the government of Germany for organizing this wonderful conference, and I wish you all the very best.